Hey Marcus, you want to see what DP has to say about it? You want to rap with him for a little bit, just so people can hear both of you guys exchange.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Maybe like 5-10 minutes because I know it's getting late.
Yeah, we can give it till 11:30.
Okay.
If Brother Divine, if you want to take over and shed some light on your opinion on that.
You there, DP?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Welcome, brother. Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know there was a little bit of confusion. I forgot I even had the Zoom app on my computer. I had stepped out with my family, and I came back around 8:45. And then from there, I think y'all were already live. And I was trying to get the link, but I didn't. But it's all good. I'm here now. I know what to do for next time. So next time we could definitely do a part 2, and I can also do it from the Zoom app on my phone. But I want to speak to just a few things. I'm not going to get too deep today because, Brother Marcus got to go. But in regards to that study, I'm thoroughly familiar with that study that he had referenced, right? In that study, and this is interesting, whenever you do any kind of case study like that, right, using any kind of research methodology, and you're doing what's called a qualitative study, and you need quantitative data, right? You are sourcing it from individuals that are anonymous. Okay, so genotype does not always equal phenotype. Okay, so there are people, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Marcus Webb, are you familiar with the haplogroup of Albert Einstein? What is his haplogroup?
Am I familiar with his haplogroup? No.
Correct.
I would assume he's some kind of European.
Just look it up. Do a quick Google search and tell me what it returns to you. I'm gonna hold that there for a second. And also, when you go and you look at those 5 individuals that were sourced, the aDNA, which is ancient DNA, and they pull it from the petrous bone in the skull, which is right behind the ear, because that's where the best preserved aDNA is at. Because if you try to get it anywhere else, it's going to be corruption. It's going to be leak in regards to the DNA chain, and then over time it could be contaminated with modern DNA when you're trying to sequence the genome, right? So you have a J1 and J2, right? Both males have J1 and J2, but the females, if you go back and look at the females' DNA, because you only can get mitochondrial DNA or autosomal DNA from women, they vary. All 5 of them have different DNA, right? And the males have J1 and J2. So the individuals that was alive now that are there in Lebanon, we don't know who they are. None of that data is released to you when you're reading this academic study. Okay, so we don't know what the phenotype of these individuals are. We don't know where they source these people are from. We don't know if these people migrated there and claimed that they were indigenous to that region. We don't know any background to the individuals in that study. And you're not going to find that in the study, because one of the things that make the study good is it's double blind, right? So you're not going to, that information is not going to be revealed to you. And I want to share one more article with him as soon as he gets that information for me. And then we can hold it to next time, because I'm thoroughly into the DNA in regards to the subject matter. And I just want to give him one key point that he needs to actually look at to further identify this. And the next time we talk, we can get further into DNA, to all the specifics, as far as the allele, mutations, variants, et cetera. We can get into that, and I could be able to better make a point. So if you looked it up, what is his haplogroup?
Okay, so the first thing, I'll just tell you the first result that comes up when I just typed in Albert Einstein's haplogroup, and it says that his haplogroup is EZ830, and basically it says Albert Einstein's great grandfather was Neftali Hirsch Einstein, and it says approximately 20% of Ashkenazi Jews belong to the haplogroup E1B1B.
There you go. So wait, his haplogroup belongs to E1B1B1, which is your -M35. So if you look at Africans on the continent, are there any Africans that have E1B1B1? Is that a frequent DNA haplogroup that we see throughout the continent of Africa? Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes. So what does your DNA come back to? Did you get your
Hang
DNA?
on one second. Let me
Sure.
look that up. So let me see. So I'm looking it up here. E1B1 B1.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that this is it's heavily concentrated in Africa.
Correct. North Africa, East Africa.
You said North Africa and where else?
In East Africa.
Okay.
So you have it in the Horn of Africa, where your Ethiopia is at, right? Your North Africa, where your Morocco is at, even Somalia near Ethiopia, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, and then you see it in concentrations in Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon. Okay, which is really interesting.
Right. So I don't see it going into West Africa though.
No. I didn't say nothing about West Africa. What I'm simply trying to explain to you is in regards to phenotypes. So I said, if you look at E1B1B1 or E1B1, and you look at phenotypes, they will differ, even though you have the same haplogroup family. Okay. And that's extremely important, because if you take a particular haplogroup, let's say one that is commonly, European, right, which would be your R1A, right, or R1B, right? If you look at those haplogroups, those are native to the region of what we call Europe, right? You see the heaviest concentration would be in Germany and around that region, right? So if you was to take that R1A or even R1B markers and look at most of the people that have that, you would say, oh yeah, this is what white people look like. Most people that have this looks like that, even though there's still controversy on finding a pigmentation gene. We actually kind of located some things that kind of are the proto genes for pigmentation in the skin. But that is still a controversial thing, and they haven't settled that yet. But if we look at the R1A, R1B, you would say, yeah, most people that have that, they look European, right? Or they look East Asian, right? West Asian. And then if you go to your haplogroup E1B1, and then you go to the variant B, you can't say the same thing with that. Because if I look at somebody from Somalia or somebody from Ethiopia and then compare with somebody like Albert Einstein, they don't look the same phenotypically. You know why? Because there are other genes that code for phenotype. Right. So when we're talking about color, that is something that is very subjective, because if we go by what we see, and probably the best indicators for color that we have, even though we don't know if it's 100% accurate or not, would be what we find in ancient Kemet, right? Or Mizraim, right? And we have tons of art from that region, right? Art over in, let's say, Mesopotamia. Art in Mesopotamia is a little bit different, because most of that is like your terracottas, or most of that would be like your carvings and things of that nature, things that you would find in an imperial scene in like a king's, sanctuary where the king goes, and you'll see, like, for example, the Assyrian reliefs of their siege on Lachish, right? Those things don't tell you genotype. You see some phenotype from the perspective of the artist. It's how the artist is depicting it, right? And then you see some samples of that you'll get from ancient Kemet or Mizraim. So the point I'm trying to make simply, even when you look at DNA, it doesn't tell you phenotype for a DNA. That means ancient DNA, DNA that you find in the Iron Age period or the Bronze Age period or the Stone Age period. It's very difficult to kind of see what their phenotype is and what their pigment is in their skin, right? So to say definitively, oh, none of the Canaanites were what we call quote unquote black, because when we say black, right, that is, Israelites call it a byword, but it's an adjective, right? Black can, somebody being black can range anywhere from your complexion to my complexion to somebody slightly lighter than you, who we call a red bone, somebody that's darker, right? That is just something that anybody can identify with, right? That term Negro is interchangeable with that term black as well, right? So when we say these things, what are we identifying? If we're going by phenotypes of what we see in the sub-Saharan Africa and the Sahel region, right? there is a typical phenotype that we find in that region, right? You're going to say wide noses. Why? Because the nose has to be opened up much wider because of the more humid environment for air to come through, as opposed to people with much thinner noses there in Europe or Asia, because the air is very cool. So you have to prevent too much air from coming in. And that's why you have those adaptations for those regions, and genetic drift is responsible for determining that, right? Isolation, being in a region for a long period of time based on climate, diet, your geographical location, stresses in the environment, and what groups were isolated. Because some groups may have a particular gene, and then over time, you may have a heavy mutation, right? So looking at this is extremely important. And when people
that's interesting that you're saying this.
Yeah. But I mean, I teach on this all the time, and you probably may not see all my stuff. I know sometimes you jump in my live streams and stuff, but I've been sharing this information for a while. But what I'm simply trying to say is this. Let me show you this last article. And the next time we get on, if we have the time, I got like hundreds of articles. I got so many I can pick out for you to make the point that I'm making, that the people in that region were a mixed group. There were mixed groups in that region because you got to understand, Israel, or the Levant region, connects 3 different continents. So if you're connecting 3 different continents, you're going to have tons of migrations in and out of that region and different settlements over time. So when we talk about Israel is specific because we have what's called ethnomarkers, right? So ethnomarkers or ethnic markers are things that you utilize to determine a particular group of people that are distinct from the other people around them, right? So some of those things can be burial sites, right? How do they bury the dead, right? Do they bury them on their back? Do they bury them on their side in a semi-fetal position? Looking at tools, various tools that they use, grave goods that they're buried with, right? Diet. What kind of trade is that person? Or is that person a pastoralist? Are they an agriculturalist? Is that person somebody that deals in maritime trade, etc.? So we, and then it goes into like pottery and stuff like that. So we have different ways to say, okay, look, if we look at this site, it has the 4-room house. It has the burgundy brandish pottery with the collared lid, and it has black banding around it. And then we see that they bury their dead a particular way. And then we see, look, they usually use these type of grave goods. Then we can say, look, in Iron Age 1B, we can say, look, this is an Israelite site, right? Iron Age 2A and B, we know this is the Israelite site. So that means that if we go and we source skeletal remains from that region, we can say with certainty, based on not just literary evidence or what we call non-material evidence, but material evidence as well, to triangulate that the group of people that are here are more than likely represents who we will identify as Israel, right? Whether that's in the southern Levant or towards the northern Levant, right? So we're able to know that, and we know this, right? Because I read hundreds of archaeological excavational reports, right? So we know, and archaeologists know where Israelites were buried, right? But let me show you this last thing, and I'm gonna let you go because I know you don't have a lot of time. Let me just pull the article up because I want to show you this. It's extremely interesting when you look at this, right? So I'm gonna read you.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm about to right now. Not yet.
Okay.
I'm about to right now. Yeah. Here we go. It might be a little blurry, but it's okay. I can read it to you. But here's a source. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. So it's called Genetics and Archaeology of Ancient Israel, right? This is at Wayne State University. Wayne State is where? It's in Detroit, right? Wayne State University. I've been there several times. I did a lecture back in 2015 there with several other people in the quote unquote conscious community. But if you read this isn't something that was submitted by Aaron J. Brody and Roy J. King, right? Roy J. King's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University, and Aaron J. Brody is at Bade Museum of Biblical Archaeology, Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. Okay, so this is not just some random article. These are people, if you go back and you vet them and look at their background, these people got some accolades under their belt. These are certified, I would say, scholars, right? They've written dissertations, they've written articles and reports on certain things. But this right here is very peculiar because if you read it, it says this letter is a call for DNA testing on ancient skeletal remains from the southern Levant to begin a database of genetic information of the inhabitants of this crossroads region. And this region during Iron 1 period traditionally dated to circa 1200 to 1000 BCE. Archaeologists and biblical historians view the earliest presence of a group that called itself Israel. They live in villages in the varied hill countries of the region, contemporary with urban settlements in the coastal plains, inland valleys, and central hill country attributed to various indigenous groups collectively called Canaanite. The remains of Egyptian imperial presence in the region lasted until about 1150 BCE, predating the arrival of an immigrant group from the Aegean called the Philistines circa 1175 BCE. The period that follows in the southern Levant is marked by the development of territorial states throughout the region, right? 1800 BCE. These patrimonial kingdoms, including the United Kingdom of Israel and the divided kingdoms of northern Israel and Judah, coalesced various peoples under central leadership and newly founded administrative and religious bureaucracies. Ancient DNA testing will give us further refined understanding of the individuals who peopled the region of the southern Levant throughout its varied archaeological and historical periods and provide scientific data that will support, refute, or nuance our social historic reconstruction of ancient groups' identities. These social identities may or may not map onto genetic data, but without sampling of ancient DNA, we may never know. A database of ancient DNA will also allow for comparisons with the modern DNA samples, you know, the one similar to the one that you have referenced before, you know, about the Lebanese and the ancient Canaanites that lived in that region of ancient Phoenicia. It says modern DNA samples collected throughout the greater region and the Mediterranean littoral, giving a more robust understanding of the long historical trajectories of regional human genetics and the genetics of very ancestral groups of today's Jewish populations and other cultural groups in the Middle East and Mediterranean. Now, you have not read this entire article. I have it. Next time we get on in here, we can go through it piece by piece. And like I said, I have tons more that are similar to this. And what they're doing is they're putting forth a proposal and requesting to get aDNA in the regions that they know that have been peopled with who we call ancient Israel. And you know what? Guess what happened? Guess what happened? It's not even the first paper requesting this. They've been ignored. Every time they requested to get this, they have been ignored. They can't even sequence any of the DNA from known regions that we know have skeletal remains of ancient Israelites.
Wow.
And there's several factors and variables as to why that's the case. And guess what's one of the main ones? The state of Israel does not want you digging up their ancestors. They're going to tell you this. They'll share this information with you. And there's a lot of other conspiracies that's drawn up around this and speculation. But what I'm simply saying is you cannot use DNA definitively to rule out whether somebody has ancestry to ancient Israelites, because we just don't have that. We don't have that data. So you have to make a case using circumstantial evidence, because that direct evidence does not exist right now. Now, will that change in the future? More than likely, maybe, if there's more pressure.
Right. So
go ahead.
So let me just ask out of curiosity.
Sure.
Right. So let's say, because I know what you mean about like the, you know, like the with the whole Jewish, I think it's his dude named Israel Finkelstein and stuff like that. You have I forgot the name of this archaeology like group, but they're very I know what you mean about like them being very protective over those sites.
Correct.
But let's just say, you know, sometime in the future, right? They allow the genetic studies to go through, and what would you do, right? If they do the studies and let's just say that the studies came back to basically further proving that, you know, these people who call themselves Jews today are the actual Jews. How would you call that the white man's science, or would you just pack your bags and be like, well, you know, we're now Israel? Like what, how would you process that?
So there's several things that I could do in a situation like that. It's not here yet, so I can't tell you definitively what I would do, right? One of the main things I would do is whatever report that is that comes out, I would definitely read it. I would look at the peer reviewing of it and see if it's actually been validated, right, externally, outside of internal verification. That would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do, if they are the Israelites, if that's what we see definitively, then what can I do? I can't say, no, that's not true, they're not, and etc. There would have to be some degree of acceptance in regards to that, right? And then number three, either I would choose either to continue in the path that I've been going, right? Looking at Deuteronomy chapter 29, looking at the strangers that covenanted along with Israel, and pretty much became just cleaving Gentiles, if you want to say that's the term that's used later on, amongst Israel, and continue my walk, or I may venture and do something else. I mean, I can't tell you 1,000% sure what I would do until that time comes. If that day does happen, make sure you give me a call and we can talk about it. But until that day arrives, I have enough circumstantial evidence to make a case that we have Israelites that migrated into West Africa. Now, my angle is going to be much unique than other Israelites that you've spoken to. And you've been on my chats before. You know what I'm saying? So you should get maybe
that's what I'm looking for, bro. That's what I'm looking for. I would like better, arguments and evidence presented than the things that I've been presented, because one thing that I'm going to do, number one, is I will definitely fact check you. I'm going to look into the sources that you're coming from, and if my job is to sniff it out, honestly, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to test everything and make sure everything is that we're believing in is the correct way. But I would definitely, man, I don't know how you feel. I don't know if you paid for that article or whatnot, but if by any chance, I could read that article as well, that would be great. That would be
okay.
Great.
I'll see, because I do pay for stuff. Sometimes I get favors from people who know our professors, or people in academia that share stuff with me. Right now,
well, if you paid for it, I don't want you to send me, resources.
I won't send it for you to have it, but I'll have it in my cloud so you can access it and read it. You just won't be able to download it or add comments, anything, but you can read it. Right. So I'll have it so that way that can be done. Like I said, because I have so many articles, some of them are categorized, some of them are not. This one, since I just got thrown on here, I just had the image on my desktop, so I was able to bring it up quickly. But I have to go into my files and pull out all my art. I'll have everything for you next time we speak. But what I want to say is this. I want you to do that because I'm part of an organization called the International Society for the Study of African Jewry that's led by Tudor Parfit and Edith Bruder. And these are two individuals who are very critical of any kind of African Jewry. And they believe that anybody on the continent of Africa who claim to be Jews are more than likely converts, right? But the interesting thing about what they've done is that they've created this organization that consists of people in academia, professors, scholars, students who are ethnologists, people who deal in genetics, people who deal in religion, people who deal in linguistics, and just people who are enthusiasts on the subject matter, right? They've invited them to come in and contribute to this group, right? So I've helped to contribute to this group, and I have a paper drafted up that I'm going to present to this group and have it peer reviewed in front of them. And then after the peer review is done, I'm going to have it published. And then once it's published, then it'll be for public consumption, right? So all y'all can get it, you can read through it. But pretty much what I've done is I have challenged their perspective on how they identify what is Jewish and what is Israelite, right? Because they make some, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but some oversights in regards to how they identify certain things. And it's interesting because the same scrutiny that they give in how they identify things, it's loosely ignored when looking at groups like the Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Talmud and writings based on the Talmud. I don't know how familiar you are with that, right? Have you heard of the Archon Shuhan? Are you familiar with that? Okay. So one example, and I'll give this to you real quick, it's called the Minhagim, right? The Minhagim literally means customs, right? And pretty much...
How do you spell that?
Minhaggim. Minhagim, right? So these are customs, right? And customs differ between different Jewish groups. You have the Mizrahi, which is the Jews that reside in what's called the Middle East, the Ashkenazim, the Jews that went and settled in Germany, and then the Sephardim, which are the Jews that settled there in the Iberian Peninsula, right? And they're just samples of them. There's also Jews that are, claimed to be in India, some to be in China. There's actually North a great Africa. Documentary written on created on this by this guy who's a Jew, and it's actually an excellent documentary. The only difference is they never sought them out anywhere else besides the regions that they went to go look, right? But suffice it to say, the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at these groups over time, right, they develop what's called customs. And these customs are things that are done in the land, and they're an adaptation based on the environment that they're in. Okay. And these things develop over time, so much so that some of the customs actually is equal to any kind of oral tradition, right? And I can go into that to you, but I have a lecture called Walk It Out. Write that down, go check it out. It's called Walk It Out. It's about an hour and some change. Check it out, and you'll see, what I'm talking about. Some of my papers is in there. And you'll see that when these customs come up, these are things that they either had from acculturation from that region. Sometimes these Jews intermingled with people in that region, and they just picked up customs that is done in a particular region, right? But if you parse out those customs and go to the core, you'll see that they actually have what's called halakhic practices, or practices that are implicit in Torah that they've made explicit. They made an explicit practice, right? So Torah may say sacrifice the Passover lamb, but not give you instructions on how to do that, right? So you'll see that develop much differently depending upon where the people are at, right? But what you do is that you look at other, passages in the text to kind of like figure out, like, hey, if the text says be mindful of the welfare of the animal, you can say, look, okay, if we're going to kill this animal, we got to do it in the fastest way possible with the least amount of pain, right? And these are things that they do. When they go into Africa, they don't look at these things, right? They don't look at the customs that the migration of Israelites in a certain region picked up over time. And if you parse it out, you actually see that they have their own halakhic laws, right? And this is something that I never seen either Buddha do, and I don't see Tudor Parfit do. And what Tudor Parfit says, he acknowledges, and I'm gonna show you next time we talk, he acknowledges in his own book, he acknowledges like, hey, these practices that we see that they're doing, it's not Jewish. It would be more Israelite than Jewish. But what does he mean by Israelite? When we speak to the Hebrewists in the region of Southeast Nigeria, they'll tell you, hey, we do Odinani and Omenana, and in the core of this is the things that's done in pre-exilic ancient Israel.
Hey, DP.
And the things that you see surrounding it is
DP.
the minhagim, or the customs. This is why sometimes it's difficult for somebody like a Edith Bruder or Tudor Parfit to see this, because they're not trying to parse out the practices and do an intercultural study, or what's called the comparative analysis between two groups, to see if there's a high degree of relationship. They're not doing that type of study.
Real quick, which Tudor Parfit book publication are you referencing? Just
the Jews. Hold on, let me pull it up. I got it right here on my screen. I'll show it to you. His book is Black Jews in Africa and the Americas.
Perfect.
And Edith Bruder, the one is called African Zion: Studies in Black Judaism, and these are a compilation of different articles that are written by various people. But Edith Bruder and Tudor Parfit, Edith Bruder was his understudy. But anyway, they were the ones that created this organization where they investigate what's called Black Judaism or African Jewry, right? And the problem with them is they overlook so many things. It's laughable. And I've spoken to Edith Bruder. I haven't spoken to Tudor Parfit, and I brought these things up to her, and she says, hey, put it in the paper, bring it, present it at one of the conferences, because you're a member, and we'll peer review it and discuss it there. I said, cool, no problem. You know what I'm saying? She didn't deny anything that I was saying. She didn't say it was wrong. She disagreed. She said, hey, that sounds really good. She said, put it in the article and present that paper at the conference. So I'm not just, somebody that's on YouTube, that's a YouTube personality, and I'm just, hey, I'm an Israelite. No, I'm interfacing with academia, and not just ISSAJ, ARCE, and other groups that I'm part of, that I'm also producing papers for to present. You know what I'm saying? Or to get somebody who's in there, like for example, ARCE is the for ancient Egypt, right? And for me, because I'm not a PhD in that realm, what I do is I create the paper, I give it to a PhD. What they do is that they redact it, right? And then they take it, put their name on it, and then they submit it, right? So there's ways, even if you're not in those circles, that you can still get your papers in those circles. And those are things that I've been doing and fighting to do for years, right? So when I'm going to go in with you, and that's why I said, go ahead and review it. You're going to see how meticulous it is, how detailed it is. And then you're going to be like, wow, you know what? That's interesting. I really don't see them addressing these points that you're making. It's because this is a new field, right? Examine it, and you'll see when they give you the preface for their organization, they'll tell you this is a brand new field. You've never had an organization that got a whole bunch of minds together and say, hey, let's test out the authenticity of African Jewry. It hasn't been done yet, and of this magnitude until this group was formed back in 2010. You know what I'm saying? When they did their first conference. So what I'm presenting there is something that has not been presented before. So we're talking about, being on the cutting edge of academia in a realm that is not that mature yet. Right. So the problem with other Israelites, and I'll say this real quick and I'll let you go, Marcus. The problem with other Israelites is, you know, my brother and sisters, some of them write books and that's cool. Right. Some of them may know how to speak the language. Some of them may know stuff about history. But the problem is they're not writing papers to submit to organizations.
Right.
So that is a different degree of scholarship where you're like, okay, look, if we're as an Israelite community are going to really make our point known, we got to submit papers. And we got to go to conferences and be peer reviewed and be able to stand on our square and defend what it is that we're teaching. Right. And because I interface with people in academia all the time, professors, students, post-grad students, whatever, I'm constantly going back and forth with them because I'm putting things out there to see how they vet it. Right. So I can go back and make some changes in my final papers. But go ahead. I'll let you speak. I'm sorry.
Okay, right. So I really do like and I respect the approach that you're taking. But let's just be, let's be honest. This is not the approach that. Let's be honest. This is not the approach that many people, within that school of thought that they take. Instead, their approach is more of, this is the truth. Let's look at this passage in the Bible. The Israelites are black. And when someone like me, hears that information and I reject it, then I'm looked at like I'm crazy because I'm rejecting, some flim-flam information. But I feel like, from someone with that school of thought, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Like from your point of view, you're coming across all this information, then, you do have that responsibility in putting in that paper. And, getting it peer reviewed and getting the response. And if it is factual, then it will be established as a fact. And then when it's brought out into the public, when people disagree with it, then I feel like then you have every right to look at them, like they're crazy. But until then,
I wouldn't do that because I know that is part of academia, right? That's peer review. Peer review sometimes can be lenient, sometimes it can be brutal. Right. That's part of peer review. So it's something you accept and you allow your work to be picked apart and criticized and so forth. And then you write responses. Right. And that's how you answer to that. You don't have to yell at somebody and say, man, you know what? The Most High going to judge you and you the 2/3, you're going to be destroyed. I don't have to say that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And again, brothers do that. And that's their prerogative. I'm just saying for me, somebody has to be in this community to kind of do a paradigm shift, right? To get things to go in more of a formal, structured, institutionalized format of presenting data, presenting information, presenting a thesis, right? Or even theories with the same research methodology that you would find in any other school of thought. I'll give you an example. Mormons, right? Mormonism, the Church of Latter-day Saints, right? In Utah, they have their own institution. They got PhDs that put out papers in regards to Mormon theology, right? You have the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And people can laugh and say what they want to say about them, but these institutions have PhDs that are defending their worldview. So us as Israelites, we have to do the same thing. We have some people in our community that are scholarly, right? That are also doing the same thing. Matter of fact, I don't know if you've heard of the African Hebrew Israelites, right? Or KOI, Kingdom of Yah, Benjamin's group.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have a point person that has also submitted papers in the ISSAJ as well. So you do have some groups that are interfacing with academia, so that way they can see what our perspective is, right? But it's not the majority. It's maybe 1% out of our entire group. Most brothers want to get on the corner and do their thing, and that's fine. If that's what they want to do, fine. But what I'm saying is, if somebody like you is serious and really trying to find out, okay, if I parse out all the fanaticisms and romanticism, sensationalism, and you're saying that you guys are descended from Israelites, like, can you give this to me in some kind of formal package that I can examine with a proper research methodology that I can follow, right? And I made a post on my Facebook page to kind of, re-emphasize what that is. And I'll walk you through, when we go over this, if you want to go over my thing, I'll walk you through from endpoint to endpoint how I followed the proper research methodological protocol. When you follow that protocol, that is how you internally verify something after you create a hypothesis, which is a statement that can be proven or disproven based on whatever presumptions that you have, right? Or presuppositions that you have, or assumptions that you make based on whatever data you're familiar with. But before you do that, you got to research all the literature in that field before you create your hypothesis. But first, it starts with a problem. What problem are you trying to solve? It's an entire process, right? Then you got to go vet through the data that you get, do quantitative, qualitative research. It's an entire process. So I'll bring you through each part of that process and what I've done in order to arrive to my conclusion. And this is the same thing that I have in my... Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean that's something that, like I would say, I would definitely respect a lot more. I do have a quick, just a couple of quick questions, real quick.
Sure.
Because I do have to end up filling out.
Yes, I know. Go ahead.
Just kind of like so you mentioned something. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that there were, I guess, there's observations of pre-exilic Israelite customs in West Africa. Was
correct.
That what you were getting at?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the question I would ask then is, if you say pre-exilic, mm-hmm. Then I'm assuming that you're referring to any time period before the Babylonian captivity, right?
Correct.
All right. So the question I would really have with that is, how did, because, obviously after the Babylonian captivity, we do have some reform amongst the Israelites, especially coming out with Ezra and Nehemiah when they did their reform and everything. But when you say pre-exilic customs, how did that get into sub-Saharan Africa, around that time period? Like when would you say, like, how did that end up in Africa?
So I'll answer that. That's pretty easy, but I'll answer that for you, right? So that's an excellent question. Now, the Babylonian exile, right, that we're talking about, the Israelites went into Mesopotamia, and they were in several regions. Like, one was Chabar, that we see Ezekiel talk about, the river Chabar that he talks about in Ezekiel chapter 1. And then in that region, it's really the upper middle class and the elitists that are brought there. If you go into the book of Jeremiah, he mentions the exact number of Israelites that was actually taken there, and the rest was left in the land, right? The rest was left in the land. So everybody was not taken into captivity, right? But anyway, when they got there, they created their own city called Al-Yahudu, and there are tablets there, Marushu tablets you can look up as well, that show you that they became a thriving community based on the letter that they received from Jeremiah about what to do in captivity. You see it in Jeremiah chapter 29, right? Because there was more than one siege on Jerusalem and more than one captivity. Okay, you have a 597 and 587. It's two of them 10 years apart, okay? And then the northern tribes were sieged by the Assyrians, and all of them weren't even taken out either. Some of them were still left in the land. How do we know that? Because when Josiah did his reform, he sent the letter to ask the people that were still there from the northern tribes in the land to come and celebrate Passover. He was trying to do a unification in regards to Passover, ecumenical Passover, right? So we know some was still there in the land. Everybody was not taken away into captivity. Okay. So the question you asked is, well, how did they get into Africa? Right. So I'm gonna give you an example of something to go ahead and look up. Look up P. Amherst 63, right? P. Amherst 63. All right. That is a manuscript that was, well, if you want to call it manuscript, I would say papyri, that was actually found, and that's what P stands for, papyri, that was actually found on the island of Elephantine. And we know that Jews, quote unquote, were stationed there, right? We get that also when we go and look at the Passover letter, right? From the Elephantine papyri, right? It's a whole collection of different things that were written in Aramaic. But the reason why this is important is because this was actually written a little bit different. It was kind of like crypto, right? Where it was kind of disguised, and it took them some time to actually decipher it. But when they finally deciphered it, what they saw was that there were a bunch of information that was there that wasn't found elsewhere. One of the things that was found is a psalm that doesn't have Zion in it, that doesn't speak about a Messiah, and it doesn't talk about the king. And they said these are traits of the northern tribes. And there was also another narrative that was written there by somebody, we're not sure who the author is, about the tribes, the northern tribes going into the south and having a Judite captain over them to give them some kind of asylum from what was going in the north. And what they were saying is that this is all social memory, right, from oral traditions that were brought from northern tribe Israelites that migrated into Egypt and made their way down to Elephantine Island. And next time we speak, I'm going to show you the magazine article that I have, archaeological magazine article that I have of it. And either I could show you to like the paper form that I have here, or I could show it to the one online, where they say that that actual site that was there, especially when you read the Elephantine Papyri, you'll see that that station that was there was a mercenary community, right? Because Egyptians never had a standing army, even when they were under the captivity of other groups like the Persians and so forth. They never had a standing army. So they would have to do a draft all the time. But what they did was when these northern tribe Israelites migrated into Egypt and made their way south to Elephantine, which is like one of the major stops you make on your way going to Sudan, right? Into the Sahel region, they gave them work, and they said, hey, if you guys want to be mercenaries to be drafted when we need you to get work done, you guys can set up a whole community here. And more of them start to go there, to the point where they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to reestablish ourselves here. And this is why they reached out and sent the Passover letter to Jerusalem to try and make sure that they're getting, you know, all of the various points done in regards to actually performing the Passover, because they were restructuring their community there. Well, these same individuals that were there, right, they disappeared after a certain period of time because they migrated out. Some of them took the Sahel region to West Africa. Some went further south. And what I'll do is that I'll show you these migration routes, and I'll show you primary and secondary sources on that. Primary would be anything
that would be
to the event that we're talking about, or the subject matter. Secondary would be expert opinion, giving you the analysis of the primary source, right?
Yeah. Okay, so that's good. That's good. I definitely would want to hear more about that, because there was going to be a follow-up question that I had,
Sure.
as far as that, them going in the Elephantine, how do we establish it as a fact that, these Israelites actually migrated, west to West African societies? Or could this have been maybe, a thing where, the Jews would have shared their doctrine with West Africans who were establishing trade, with these with Elephantine societies and stuff, and brought it back to their culture? How do we?
That's an interesting point that you make there, and I'm going to dissect that next time when we get time, because that's an argument that Tudor Parfit makes in regards to the Sephardim communities that was established on the west coast of Africa and on the Isles, to the west of Africa as well. I'm going to show you something that he says to let you know that there were other practices and customs that were there that predate these Sephardim. I'll give you an example, right? This is very easy. The Sephardim, we know what they practice because we have works by them. So we know customs. Customs are unique, not just what you do as far as doing Torah, but the halakhic practices that you do are unique. So we know if, let's say, for example, a point that you make, and I give you a really good example of that, right? If you look at Black Jews, quote unquote, in southeastern Nigeria, there are three groups. There's the Hebrewists. Those are the ones you're going to hear me talk about the most. But there's also the ones that set up Jewish congregations and they convert to Second Temple Judaic practices. Now, watch this. If you have let's say, tefillin on, and you have a prayer shawl on, and you're doing certain prayers a particular way, we know what group of Jews influenced you. We know if you went online and looked it up, which some of them did, and said, oh, look, this is Jewish, and adopted. We know based on customs, right? Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, even Reformed, we know by those things who influenced you. Yeah. So when we look at the Sephardim and the groups and the regions that they were in who were influenced, we can tell by their customs and certain unique halakhic practices who influenced them. But guess what? There's also been discoveries of individuals that had practices that had nothing to do with Sephardim customs. And that's what I'm going to show you. So what you're asking is excellent questions. It just hasn't been answered by somebody that has thoroughly studied this. And I'm going to showcase that to you. And not only from primary sources, but also secondary sources from people who are from those regions who have PhDs that have actually done this work already. I'm going to show that to you. The problem is it's not common knowledge in our community, but that's my goal, is to make it common knowledge, because if we're going to continue to have these kind of tactful dialogues, we have to be familiar with the data that supports our position and the data that disproves our position. So I can argue against my position from I would say the lens of Edith Bruder and Tudor Parfit, and argue against it the way that they will attempt to do it, right? Simply to show that I know what the competing arguments are. Even if we look at the Hamitic hypothesis, the Oriental hypothesis, and the Niger-Benway confluence theory, these are all things that attempt to disprove these things that I'm saying to you. But there's holes in them. Okay. And these are people in those regions, who are making these people, who I'm writing to, I'm emailing, I'm speaking to on the phone, and I'm bringing forth these things and say, hey, why didn't you examine this further? An example of that would be the Hebrewists. And this is the last thing I'll leave you, because I know you got to go. The Hebrewists are the group that is ignored by Edith Bruder. And you know what the Hebrew says? They said that they are pre-Talmudic Israelites on the basis of the alleged Hebraic traditions of their forefathers. This is what they say. Okay. And you know how that's proven or disproven? By their practices. If they practice anything that is from Second Temple Judaism during the Talmud period, where the Talmud was compiled in 200 CE, and then later on it was added to, or the Mishnah, 200 CE. 500, 600 CE, you have the final compilation and codification of your Talmud. But if we found any practices during let's say, for example, 1st century CE, when Yeshua lived, right? If we found any of those customs amongst the Hebrewists, then we know they're lying. Because we know that they've been influenced by Second Temple Judaism, but you don't find none of these practices amongst the Hebrewists. You only find them about the ones who convert to Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, not the Hebrewists. And if you read the litany of papers that's been put together by Tudor Parfit and Edith Bruder, they do not go in detail about the Hebrewists. They only deal with the ones who have converted to Judaism, and then they make the claim that, oh, no, this is authentic. This has always been part of our custom. No, it hasn't. What are you talking about? Y'all converted to that. And we know, because we look at the customs, the way you practice things, you carry certain things out, certain prayers that you make. We see all of this. So that is the issue. They do not deal with the Hebrewists. And it's funny because they're the ones who coined these phrases, because Edith Bruder went to Abuja and she studied there in a synagogue, and she asked those people, hey, man, you guys seem like so how long you been doing this? And they said, oh, this has always been in our tradition. This has always been in our custom. This is what they say to her. And you can go back to a book and read this. Black Jews in Africa and the Americas, on page 111. It says Edith Bruder sent a questionnaire to the Gihon Synagogue in Abuja, which demonstrated that the congregation believed that they had grown up with Israelite beliefs, and that such beliefs were part of the indigenous culture of the Igbo. How do you prove or disprove that? You look to see the influence that's on those people. If they have the Tefillim, if they have the prayer shawls, if they're doing Ashkenazim prayers, then you know that that part of it is untrue. What are you talking about? But if you see other things that they do, like, circumcision on the 8th day, and typically when you have a particular practice, it ties back to a mythos. If there's no mythos for a practice, then it's not indigenous.
All right.
So, all right, man. All right. So let me, because I do got to pull out.
Sure.
But I just want to ask.
Let's do this real quick. All right.
I just got 2 questions. I just want to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
Wait a minute, really quick, because this brother Ron Shields got clips for days loaded up, man, and you might be asking for something you're not ready for. Let's put a time limit on it. Let's get what do you say is enough? 5 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, I just want quick answers for these 2 questions.
I'm gonna start my timer right now. 5 minutes. This doesn't have to be the end. I think this is a really enriching conversation. Everybody's competent, and Ron Shields got a clip full. He got clips for days full of information, and I feel like this could really be edifying for the community. If you guys want to get together and link and talk about a second round, we could definitely do that. But so let me start my timer, and we'll get 5 to 10 minutes going for you guys to engage, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, these are just I just want to ask 2. I gotta get my silly questions in. Two silly questions, right? So what would you say Deuteronomy chapter 28 is a strong enough passage, to prove that, West Africans or African Americans are Israelites?
No, it's not strong enough.
Okay, thank you.
I don't even use that anymore. I used to when I first came into this walk, but I don't need it anymore. There's so much other information, you don't need it.
I respect that, bro. I really do respect that. Okay. The next silly question would be, is there any biblical passage that you would use to prove that the Israelites were black?
Were black? When you say black, what do you mean by that? You mean like jet black, like the actual adjective itself describes a color? Or what do you mean when you say black? You mean like a state of being? You mean something that has a connotation only here in the Americas? What do you mean when you say black?
Right. So anything that I guess would indicate, see, this is where I knew you was going to say something like that. All right.
Because you're talking to me now. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
it's a little bit different.
Gotta be specific.
All right. So
that they were people of color, you're saying?
Well, okay, let's start with the jet black. Let me just
nah, that doesn't exist in there. That does not exist in the text.
Okay, so you would agree that there is no biblical passage that teaches that the Israelites were jet blacks.
Correct. But what I will say is that aside from the text itself, because remember, the text is not concerned with things that we're concerned of today, right? Because the people who wrote it was living in that environment, right? They didn't have these later on anthropological racism structures in place, right? Where you call people Negroes, that term did not exist back then, right? Some people say go back to Niger mean black or whatever, but even that term itself is not an Iron Age term, right? But they wouldn't be concerned with the things that we're concerned with today because of our displacement. And because of our displacement, we're trying to reconstruct and restore something that we say is lost. So the text is not written in a sense where it's like, okay, well, what we're going to do is explain to people what our exact hue is, what our specific phenotypes are. So when the time comes and they're displaced, they will know who they are, right? So the text is not written from that perspective, right? It's what's called cultural literature, right? It's the social memories, the customs, the practices, the history, the legends, all of these things compiled in one thing because the people who are writing it, people who are reading it already knew who they were, right? So they're not writing it from our perspective. So I never eisegete the text to support me trying to reconstruct and restore. Okay. I don't need to take that approach because if you do that, you're gonna make a lot of fallacious arguments, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't take that approach. I'm very careful what I do because I understand the text's historical, cultural perspective, why it was being written, who was being written to, what are the different climates that they encounter, whether political climate, social climate, migration patterns, trades, being pastoralists, agriculturalists, hunter-gatherers, etc. You have to examine. This is a great book by Professor Grab called Ancient Israel, right? And I recommend everybody get that book. It's an excellent book, and he's one of the leading professors in that field. And he writes in the preface of it, an introduction, he actually explains that, and actually to really understand this culture, you have to look at everything that's outside the Bible, right? You got to look at the region that they're in, right? You have to study the climate that they're in. You got to study what's called zoo archaeology, which means the ancient animal remains that were left behind and people that died. You have to look at the artifacts. You got to look at the pottery. You got to look at the region, the central countryside, and see what that entails. Horticulture, that's practices on the highest steeps that you do, where pastoralism is done in the South. You have to look at their relationship to the river, which would be the Jordan River, and then the coastal plains, and then the Mediterranean Sea towards the other side of them. You have to look to see who was the groups to the north of them, to the south of them, to the east of them, to the west of them. You got to see who was encroaching upon their territory that caused them to do things that you see in 1 Samuel 7 and 1 Samuel 8. You have to look at all of these things before you even dive into the text. Because if you don't understand these things, you're going to misinterpret details in the text. So when I look at the text, I don't have to read it from that perspective in order to say these are people of hue, right? These are people that that shared certain phenotypes that will be similar to ours and possibly have the same DNA. We'll find that out whenever there's no stingy release of those details by the antiquities agencies that are actually holding on to this data, right? Because the antiquity agencies of different states and countries are the ones responsible for allowing certain information or data to go out or restraining or restricting it. So what I'm saying is, I don't need to take that approach. If Israelites continue to do that, that's their business. But I challenge them to step it up a little further and take different approaches, because there's enough data that you can use to support your position that you don't have to do the same thing that's been going on since the early 1900s to prove this point.
Right.
We have too much information to make better arguments. And
I think that that's a great perspective to come from, man. And I'm not knocking that at all. That's what I'm waiting for, to be honest with you. And I feel like
if you was part of KHM before you joined the organization you joined, you wouldn't be a Christian right now. But that's just me. Because you would have had so much
information. Make that another discussion.
Like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, you would have had more information.
Maybe we can make that another discussion. But
yeah,
that sounds great.
I mean, as far as that, you know, with everything you were saying, I'm looking forward to hear, more of what what you're gonna bring out on that. And I'm gonna look into some of these sources that I typed down that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, I feel like if this approach,
I even give you sources of people who are on the con position of mine, and that's how you know somebody is doing honest scholarship, right? I'm not gonna just cherry pick the things that support my position, right? I'm gonna give you the biggest critics of my position, and the reason why I'm giving you their information is so that way, when we have a discussion, you'll see how I pick it apart, right?
Okay.
So, and then you get an idea of what's in my paper, when I'm going to present, everything like that. And that's how you know somebody is really being sensitive to what's out there, right? Whether it's pro or con, and that they're willing to explain to people, look, this is the opposing view. This is why the opposing view has that perspective. These are the strengths and weaknesses of that position. And this is my position, right? And I've arrived to my conclusion because of A, B, and C. You go through it again, the research methodology you took, and said, this is why I arrived to my endpoint, which is my thesis, to explain my theory or whatever else. And this is why I say it's superior to current literature that's out there. That's all part of the process, right? So,
So do you think that, if all of the other Israelites out there, that people that identify themselves as Israelites, do you think that if they all took this approach that you're taking, that the world would respect it, respect the movement like 100 times better?
I would say yes, because if you look at it like this, right, Christianity is so far-fetched and widespread, right? There's a purported 2.5 billion Christians on this planet. So y'all are winning, right? As far as numbers is concerned, right? My community is nowhere near 0.001% of that, right? But what I would say is this, because Christianity is so large, you have institutions, okay? You have scholars that have PhDs in the field of biblical archaeology, of theology, etc. We don't have a lot of people from our community, and we don't have I can't say we don't have no institutions. We have some institutions, but they're like in their infancy at best, right? So we're not as established, and that's because you don't have a lot of people in my community that are trying to shift the paradigm to go towards a more structured direction. Because in Atlanta alone, I'm just gonna speak for Atlanta. I've been to so many cities in the U.S. and I've traveled outside the U.S. But in Atlanta alone, there are street preachers that condemn you to hell on the corner. And if all a person saw was that part of Christianity, they wouldn't respect it, right? But they wouldn't know about the ones that do textual criticism. They wouldn't know about the ones that do archaeology, the ones that do theology or comparative theology. They wouldn't know about that group, because all they see is the ones that's there street preaching, condemning people to hell with these big signs saying America's going to hell and this and that. Westboro Baptist Church is a great example of that. And I bring that up all the time. Do you know who Westboro Baptist Church is?
Yeah.
Marcus? Okay. Yeah. If all I knew was them, I would think the same thing. Like, yo, these Negroes is crazy. What is going on over here? You know what I'm saying? But it's because our community.
That's what West Camps be doing, though.
Well, if you want to say that, but what I'm saying is our community is still immature, right? We still have a lot of growing to do. And it's like right now, it's a big fad with Christian apologetics to now investigate Israelites. But this has been going on for a long time. It didn't start with vocab Malone. It didn't start with you leaving Israelite. This has been going on for at least 30 years, where Christian apologists have attempted to dive into this. And I have all the documentation on this, but it hasn't been as widespread until the advent of YouTube. Now that YouTube is here, it makes this movement much bigger than what it was currently, and more people are converting, quote unquote, I'm using Christian terms, over to Hebrew Israelism, right? So now it's piquing the interest of Christian apologists to say, hey, wow, this thing is growing. They know somebody that knows somebody, if they don't know somebody who's an Israelite, and they need to find out more about it. What I try to do is get them to look at what I'm doing. This is why when people make videos about me, I encourage it, because I want Christians to see this element of Hebrew Israelite. Because you know why? When they hit me up, Marcus, they like, yo, I didn't even know this information existed. And you know what happens? I give them more and more. I answer question after question. And after a while, you see them either joining KHM or saying I'm an Israelite now or doing anything. That's what I want. So I want all of y'all to make as many videos you can about me. Bring all the Christians my way. I will happily serve them with love, tactfulness, and diplomacy. And I will give them the part of our community without all the sensationalism, the romanticism, and say, look, there's actually a valid case. Examine this for yourself.
Okay, fair enough. You know, there's definitely more to talk about and more to question, but you know, I don't want to keep this going for too long.
So let me do this real quick before we leave, because I didn't ask you not one question. Can I ask you one question? And then next time we talk, it's going to go both ways. So you can ask some questions. I'll ask some questions, because I'm not letting you off the hook. Okay. I've watched your live streams and I'm Facebook friends with you and I follow your stuff. So I know what you're about. Right.
Okay.
And
okay.
Questions that I want to ask you. So the main pressing question of many that I want to ask you is kind of simple, but the answer may not be simple. Right. The question I want to ask you is, do you believe that you converting, because you believe Christianity is through conversion, right? Being a Christian is through conversion, correct? Conversion process, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So do you believe that what you have today, as far as Christianity, with your Christian experience, your conversion, all that other stuff, is superior to what your ancestors had during pre-colonial times in West Africa?
That's an interesting question. I don't know what kind of, you know, Hebrewism. I mean, because my thing is this.
No, forget Hebrewism. I didn't say Hebrewism. I'm saying
right. You're asking
your ancestors in West Africa. Take Hebrewism out of it.
Right. So when you say stuff like, you know, what kind of you say what kind of Christianity did they have?
No. They didn't have no Christianity pre-colonial period. There was no Christianity there. Islam came into there, right?
Okay, so like repeat your question again.
Sure. So the question is, Christianity that you have today, your Christian experience, right? Your form of doxology, right? Which is how you worship, your theology, right? What you know about eschatology, right? All of that stuff from your Christian worldview, right? Because I'm assuming you're a presuppositionalist. That means you assume that the Bible is true and you make your arguments from the fact that the Bible is infallible and that God is true and every man is a lie, correct?
I mean, we kind of got into the discussion a little bit earlier with Pac, you know, about things, but
are you a
depends.
Presuppositionalist? Yes or no? If you don't know what that is, I can just break it down for you, but I would like to know that, because that drives how you view things, right? Because if you're not a presuppositionalist,
so
that means,
from what you described it, right? You said things, yeah. From what you described,
that means you automatically believe that God is real, He's true, and the Bible is His infallible word.
I would say that's
convincing of that. You know it's true.
That's a tough one, bro. I mean, that's
what? Whoa!
That's
I thought you was a Christian. What you mean? That's a tough one. What?
I mean, yeah, that's just not. I don't know. Like, I don't know what all the implications are with presup. You know,
I just told you.
Do you lay them all out?
Do you believe without proof that God is real, that God is the truth in the person of Jesus Christ, and that the Bible is His infallible word? That means there's no errors, no mistakes. And that is the what he has left for us today. So that way we can get to know him, get to know Jesus Christ, who's the fullness of the Godhead, right? In the Trinity. You believe in the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
So Jesus is the fullness of the Trinity. And you believe that without any kind of, hey, let me convince you of this. No, this, you automatically believe that, correct? Right now.
It's not, it's, okay, so it's not like some automatic thing to where, you know, like I was, it's not like an automatic thing where, you know, somebody just said it and then I believed it.
No. I'm saying, forget anybody else. I'm saying for you, when you went through your conversion process, after your conversion process, do you believe all those statements, those axioms that I just said? Do you believe that all of them are true? That God is real, right? We can witness him through his creation or through the moral compass that we have in our hearts, that God is real in some revealed way, that Jesus Christ is real and he's the express image of the Father and he's the fullness of the Godhead, and that they left, when I say they, the Trinity, all three persons left the Bible or the word of God in the form of the Bible here, which is his revealed word that is infallible. That means
okay, so
okay.
That's
all. That's all presupposition. So you argue from that perspective. So if an atheist comes to you, an Israelite comes to you, a Muslim, you argue from that perspective, right? So that's what presuppositions do.
But see, I don't know, because that's different. You know, that's not how I always argue.
No. I didn't say always. I said since post conversion. Now, I'm not talking about what you did before you converted. Post conversion, where you are 1,000% sure that you are a Christian. This is the best way to go. This is only one way to heaven, and that's through Jesus Christ. Like, once you've been convinced of these tenets of Orthodox
like so the stuff that you're saying, you know, like different doctrines, those are things that I definitely, you know, subscribe to.
Okay, that's it. That's all I'm asking. So I'm saying, as a presuppositionalist, somebody that believes all of the statements that I made, and you are where you're at today in your walk, I'm saying, do you believe that that state is more, you can't say more because it's a double negative, but do you believe that it's superior to the culture, the quote unquote religion that your ancestors had and was practicing before colonialism? That's all I'm asking. And if you don't know what that is, maybe you don't know what that is.
Right. Like,
I'm gonna tell you, they
like,
were not Christians.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be honest with you, Divine. I mean, I haven't really looked too deep into West African, you know, spirituality like that. You know, I haven't gotten in too deep about that. That's never been, you know, something that you know, caught my interest, because, you know, for the most part, what I known was, you know, we were, you know, in the midst of, we were probably doing some type of idolatrous practices, you know, and it just never caught my interest.
But you gotta be honest. The reason why you perceive it that way is because of where you're at right now. Your state currently as a Christian, you're perceiving what they're doing as idolatrous.
Well, I mean, I've surfaced some of the West African traditions, but I didn't dive deep. You know, like, my thing is as soon as I see something that looks like idolatry, it's kind of like, you know, what's the point of me continuing to look into it?
Well, maybe because you're misunderstanding it. So something you may perceive as idolatry maybe even isn't idolatry. And I'll give you an example of that, right? In the Bible, we have what's called teraphim, right? So you've heard of teraphim, or what's called household idols. This is what the translators will put, but that's incorrect, right? So if a teraphim was someplace, and we know that because Rachel, she was trying to hide a teraphim that she took from Laban's house, her dad's house. And it was on the pack animal that she was on, and she was sitting on top of it. And Laban was looking for it, like, yo, where's my teraphim at? You know what I'm saying? And then they looked everywhere, and they was about to search her, but she said she was on her nida, or her period. So she was unclean, so they didn't search her. So she wound up taking that with her. That was also used when David escaped, and he put it in his bed, and he put a cover over it where it looked like it was a person. What I'm saying is, that is not an idol. That is a representative. It's not worshipped. Nobody worships it.
I mean, I've heard of.
So what I'm saying is,
I've heard of things about that. You know, like it could have been kind of like how we have today with pictures, you know, of dead
correct.
relatives.
There you go.
Right.
So if you don't know the culture, you'll see something and it'll disturb your spirit. Like, man, that looks like idolatry. I ain't gonna look into that. But that's just going to show that you are operating off of ignorance, because if you dive further and you research, you'll see that that's actually not idolatry, right? And you'll see this, like in any group in West Africa, most groups, what I would do, because I've studied thoroughly West Africa, because for me to say I'm an Israelite, how can I prove that, right? So I would be able to go through it with you and show you how there are misconceptions about practices in West Africa. And the misconceptions comes from the Western missionaries that went into West Africa that have written on it. Have you heard of G.T. Baston before?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Have you heard of Robert Hamil Nassau before?
No.
These are prominent missionaries that lived amongst the people for 10, 20 plus years and have written about the people which they lived with. And they've identified certain things. And what happens is, if you read Robert Hamil Nassau's work, it's called Fetishisms of West Africa. Look up what a fetish is. That is what they identify, things that was juxtaposed against their Christian beliefs and worldview. And they considered everything they were doing was a fetish, with the exception of certain practices that lined up exactly from what they see in the Bible. So much so that G.T. Batson was like, yo, in order for y'all to understand the Igbo people, you got to read the Levitical law. And then you got to go back to Robert Hamil Nassau's work, and you got to read his work on it, because he dealt with the ones that was in Cameroon and Angola. And so practices there that look line for line, practice for practice, that's in this book. And some of these natives who are doing these practices have no myths connected to them, which is a problem. That means, where did it come from? So I'm just saying
that's something. Yeah. I mean, that's good, you know, and I think I agree with you about that, about the whole teraphim thing. I mean, perhaps it could be both, you know, maybe it could be both sides. Both sides could be true, where some people did idolize their dead relatives.
I think even Book of Enoch or Jasher might have some extra information on that too.
Right.
But yeah, gentlemen,
that's interesting, man. I really did enjoy this conversation, man.
And vice versa.
You know, you're bringing out a lot of you know, interesting stuff, man, that, you know, definitely I'm definitely willing to hear more about, and you know, research and stuff. I really do wish that with my experience, you know what I'm saying, with the whole movement, people took this approach more than, you know, the typical approach that I've, you know, experienced. I think that this approach is way more respectable, and you know, I don't see it as a problem, to be honest. I mean, like I've said before, if I am an Israelite, I'm an Israelite. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not something I'm gonna hate or, you know, I'm gonna be upset about. But before I start claiming that I'm something, I need substantial evidence. You can't just throw a Deuteronomy 28 at me and expect me to
okay, so how about this? How about we all link in a green room and we figure out how to get a second round going, and because there's a lot of food on the table. I think we have at least over 3.5 hours worth of footage. And personally, I don't know about each of you gentlemen, but I don't really do like 5 or 6 hour lives, though I am really honored to have the both of you in this live right now. As I stated previously, I think we should get another one of these going. This is top-notch stuff. This is the type of stuff that you can play over and over and sift through minutes at a time and just really let it brew. You know what I'm saying? So with that said, DP, would you like to close us off with maybe like any last words you would like to give? Maybe 2-3 minutes, a little something. Or...
Sure. Yeah. I'll do that, and then you guys can close. I first want to say I appreciate that, Pacrosseno Leeh, for inviting me on the live. I watch your work too all the time. Want to give you big ups for challenging all of these guys. You know what I'm saying, and keeping them on their toes. And you know, just having the biblical rumble room there. Where these discussions can take place. I want to give a shout out to you, Marcus Webb. Like I said, I follow you as well. I know you, you know, antagonized me a couple of times in a good way, right? Not in a bad way. And I appreciate that. Like, I welcome challenges, right? I welcome inquiries and questions about my position because it helps me get better, right? I don't shy from it. You know, I confront it head on, and I'm willing to have a amicable discussion on it. You know, I don't have to get mad or angry. It's not that serious. I'll speak passionately at times, but it will never turn into disrespect or over talking or anything that will be considered foul or vulgar, right? And what I'll say to end off is that I think that more people in our community, my community, need to take this approach. You know, even if they want to do what they do on the street corner, on the side, when they're actually building with people one-on-one, they need to present this data, and they need to present it in an objective way where they welcome challenges, right? You don't have to condemn somebody because they disagree with you, right? You welcome it, right? Because all it's going to do is show them that you're not a cult, right? Because cults don't want you to challenge them. They don't want you to challenge their leader, their information, their perspective. And if you do, they condemn you, they excommunicate you. So we don't want to have that that stigma on us, right? So to avoid that stigma, we have to be more scholarly in how we convey our position. We have to be more temperament in our demeanor, and our disposition has to be one of indifference, meaning that if somebody doesn't agree, okay, you know what I'm saying? There's no need to get mad or yell or scream or do a million videos. It's not that serious. It's really not that serious, right? Because if you subscribe to Paul tells you in 2 Timothy how to deal with somebody who disagrees with you. He tells you peradventure, you know, if you deal with them in gentleness, humility, peradventure, if it's the Most High's will, that he would redeem them out of the snares of the devil, and that they will become a brother, right? So if you agree with that, it's all in your approach. You know, you let the brother know, hey, listen, this is not personal. I don't hate you. If you need help with anything, highlight me, let me know. I believe that you can reach people better with your works than your belief. You know what I'm saying? Put a hand out. You know what I'm saying? Put a hand down. See what you can do to help with the brother, talk with the brother, because it may be just that they need to actually have an open ear to receive what you have to say. And to cap it off, I will say that, you know, if somebody like a Marcus Webb, like I said before, had encountered me and I was able to educate him from this angle, I believe that he would still identify as an Israelite. Now, what his theology would be is different, right? Because that would be his own search. But at least with this information, what I teach, it does not conform to the Oriental hypothesis, which says that when the Israelites migrated to West Africa, there was nobody there, and it was just them. My theory does not agree with that, right? It is actually it's contrary to that. The Hamitic hypothesis, which says that the sons of Ham, or even anybody from the east, had came to the west and civilized the people there and brought them high culture, because the people they encountered there were savages, and because they came there from the sons of Ham and gave them high culture, when the sons of Japheth came there, you know, the traders, the military, and the missionaries, they was like, oh man, these people are smart and they brilliant and did this and that. They don't want to give credit to the people that are indigenous or authentic to that area, and they want to give it to some far-reaching group. My theory does not conform to that either. And when you look at the Niger-Congo confluence theory, which says that the people that we see in Nigeria, at least for now, they move from a region called Lokoja, which is near the confluence or the joining of the Niger and Benue rivers, and migrated south. And we look at the linguistic data in order to determine these migrations and spread. And this is how you see them, you know, be part of the people that's part of the Bantu peoples. My particular position actually speaks to that as well. So all the things that academia uses to kind of disprove the Israelite perspective, because we have a lot of sensationalists, romanticists that's I guess arguing for our behalf. They've made things so sensational, so romantical, that it's really just ignored by academia. It's not taken seriously until people like me, and I'm one of many, that come forth and say, no, look, let's re-examine this, right? Let's look at the research methodology that we're using, look at the approaches that we take, and the care that we take, and to understand in depth this field of information that is new, right? And we're willing to bring breakthrough information to contribute to the social network of information that could become a legacy later on. So I want to thank you guys for having me and letting me share some of this. And like I said, when we speak again, Marcus, I'm going to blow your mind. I have tons of data, tons of books and articles. This stuff I could talk for years and still not get everything out.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Again, thank you so much, Brother DivineProspect. We know you're a pillar in the community, and you know there are lots of people that are built up and edified by your teachings. Marcus Webb, I just want to thank you, brother, for being a Christian defender of the faith who promotes fair and balanced discussion. You had the courage and fortitude and stand-upness to interface with people you disagree with, and in a time where that's not very there could be more of it, and so I just want to extend my gratitude to you as well, brothers. Let's link in the green room and plan on giving something more for the people that they can latch onto. Like I said, we brought a lot of meat on this plate, and I really feel like this is something the people could really chew on and digest for a little bit. Again, thank you so much. Thank you, viewers out there. We do this for you for the edification of the community, whether you're Hebrew or whether you're a Christian, devout Christian, or Christian on the fence. We do this to you so that you can make a better informed decision. So with that, I'd like to say thanks again to the panel and to the viewers. Until next time, peace, light, and shalom.